Hi, everyone, and welcome to what was supposed to be our Facebook Live for today. Today is Monday, July 25th, and we are so sorry that we ran into technical difficulties, and so we are not able to do this live on Facebook, but we thought we would have the conversation anyway and share it. We were able to get some questions from the OM community ahead of this, and so we'll address those questions, have the conversation, and then look forward to planning another Facebook Live when technology settles down a little bit. So again, thank you so much for watching this recording. Before we get started on today's discussion, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of two additional upcoming CureOM events, both educational and both hopefully on a little bit stronger technology platforms that will not have these challenges that we had today. One is an upcoming Ask the Expert webinar. And it is entitled Understanding the Clinical Trial Process and Current Trials for Ocular Melanoma Patients. And this will be this Thursday, July 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we thank TriSalus Life Sciences for sponsoring this important educational opportunity. And we will put in, well, now I'm not sure how we'll do it. When we were going to do a Facebook Live, we were going to put the link in the comments. So we will make sure that the link is on the CureOM Facebook page. So please visit there to register for that webinar on Thursday. And then also just as a reminder that we do have our very first post-COVID in-person CureOM patient and caregiver meeting coming up August 26th at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. And Sam Buirski and Dr. Marlana Orloff will both be present there. So that will be in Philadelphia. It is a hybrid event, so we're really looking forward to seeing as many of you there in person as can make it, but most of the sessions will be available online as well. And please register ahead of time so we can plan for meals and all the other logistics. So please go to the CureOM Facebook page for that registration link as well. So now back to our topic today on Scanxiety. I am really happy to be here with Sam Buirski and Dr. Marlana Orloff. Sam is an ocular melanoma patient, an OM thriver, a mother, a wife, a friend, a daughter. She was diagnosed in 2011. And she has been a strong CureOM advocate and just a really strong OM advocate in the community for many years. I'm sure many of you know her. And we're really grateful to Sam today because she just had scans today. This is her scan week, and she is sharing herself with us at that most vulnerable time. So Sam, we're grateful to you for being here and just for being so authentic and real and present, even at a difficult time in your personal life. So really appreciate that. And then Dr. Marlana Orloff, who many of you also know, an associate professor of medicine at Thomas Jefferson University. Her clinical and research focus is on melanomas, and she has a specific interest in rare melanomas and uveal melanoma in particular. Dr. Orloff works as part of an interdisciplinary team at Thomas Jefferson University. And again, you will get to meet and hear from many of them at our meeting in August. So really appreciate the two of you being here for this topic that also is near and dear to my heart. When my husband Greg was alive, I know that we had a lot of anxiety around scans. We oriented our life, for about five plus years, every 6 to 8 weeks really, around his scans. And that really affected Greg, and it affected our family and close friends. So it's a big topic for patients and all those who support them. So really appreciate this discussion, and I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Orloff, to start us out.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I, again, apologize for not being able to see you live via Facebook, but we thought since we were here together anyway, we thought we would put this little Zoom together. So, so just to set the stage, I think we all kind of understand what Scanxiety is, but there is actually a true definition. So I thought I would just kind of read the definition out just so, we make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And then we'll certainly have kind of Sam share her story and some of the things that she deals with, and then and also uses to help her cope with some of the anxiety surrounding Scan Week. So Scanxiety is really anxiety and worry that accompanies the period of time before undergoing or receiving the results of a medical examination. And so what I think, such as an MRI, CAT scan, PET scan, we could probably even put in, for those of you that are following up in the primary primary stage, going for the eye scans, so it's really, just this kind of unknown about getting results that may then dictate what's going to happen next. And I think what this definition doesn't totally encompass is the time frame. So, for some patients who are getting scans every 6 to 8 weeks, some of that anxiety may start, mid-time, right? So you get your scan in 6 weeks, and then you may start thinking about the next scans not but 3 weeks later. And then for some of you that are on every 3 month or every 6 month or every 12-month surveillance, time periods, sometimes the anxiety can start weeks or even months before the scan. And then sometimes it can actually last, after the scan, ultimately, probably until you have follow-up with your doctor to review those scan results. So as you heard, Sam's just coming fresh off scans, just having had them not but a few hours ago. So we thought we would, learn a little bit more about her and how she copes. So go ahead, Sam.
Right. Hi, everyone. Sorry that we were not able to do the live, but I am in Philadelphia, just had my scans. And as Marlana was saying, it does differ, because if you have a primary diagnosis and you're freshly diagnosed, that first year, I remember it being awful because you don't really know a whole lot about the disease. So you really are looking for the next shoe to drop all the time. The further out it goes, it kind of waxes and wanes. I can remember, I'm 11 years out now, and I can remember in the beginning being really, really nervous, and then going through phases where I felt like it eased up a little. And then once it gets a little further out, you feel, oh gosh, the anxiety comes back in. So it definitely waxes and wanes. And it's interesting that they call it anxiety, because I don't think it always comes out as anxiety. I'm not particularly anxious around it, but there are definitely symptoms such as you're so hyper focused on what's going to go on, you forget about other things that are going on, and other things don't become as important. So you might miss things. Like, I don't always read my emails. And while that doesn't seem like a big thing, I will miss things that I should have been taken care of because I'm hyper focused on I'm going to scans. And then the other thing too is there's almost this, how you have a fight, flight, and freeze moment with scans. It tends to feel that way sometimes, but you almost have a euphoria at the end too. So once you've gone through it, maybe your results are great and you've gone through that, it's this phase where you feel like, am I crazy? Why am I all of a sudden feeling like I have mania almost, where you don't go buy a car because you might buy big things that you wouldn't have bought at other times. So it's strange to just call it anxiety. I think there's a range of emotions that can occur during that time, and they can go from sadness to anger to really happy to ambivalence to, and sometimes even you feel a little bit, if you do have a good scan and your community and you have friends who didn't have good scans, you could feel that you don't want to share that with them because you've had a good scan. So now you feel as if, why them and not me, and why, so you feel a little bit scared to share that with other people. But it is interesting because it's prior to, so it could be days or a whole week ahead of your scans, and then a day or a few days after. But I do like to schedule. So the way I handle a lot of this is I control my controllables. I will schedule my scans 2 days before I actually see the doctor. And I feel like that's the best way. When you have to wait an entire week, Never. My husband has asked me before, he goes, let's do them on the Friday and then you'll go see the doctor on the Wednesday. And I'm like, listen, there is no way. I am never doing them on a Friday. This will not happen. I mean, the world will have to be on a kilter for me to do that, just because the weekend would be terrible. So that's how I deal with that. And then I get really, really busy around scan time. I arrange lots of different things for myself to do. I always have a routine of going to specific restaurants right afterwards, or doing things so that I can control my controllables, because I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I can't control that, but I can control how I deal with it in the moment. So, and then let's talk a little bit about the door, like that door right there. The one where you're waiting behind and you're in your little gown and you're waiting for the doctor to come in. That door, I have my eyes on that door. And I think people don't speak enough about that waiting, that moment when your stomach feels like it's going to drop out and you're waiting and you can hear the doctor walking around the hallway and you're like, it's going to come in. It's going to come in. Am I going to hear my results? What is it going to be? So those moments, and in those moments, what I do is I focus on the door. I get really quiet and I start visualizing, and I usually bring up good memories. I try to visualize my kids at specific moments, or my husband at specific moments, or like holidays, or I think about things that are coming up, good things that I've got planned. Oh, I never used to plan. Prior to OM, I planned all the time. Then OM happened and I didn't plan because I felt like my plans couldn't happen anymore. Now I plan all the time. Now it's like, I plan the next thing so that OM doesn't rule my life. So that OM happens in the moment, but the next moment, there's going to be something special that's going to happen. So that's another way that I kind of deal with handling that immediate Scanxiety. But yeah, the door, waiting for that door to open and the physician to walk in is really rough. And then sit down and ask you all the questions. And all you really want to know is scans. What do they look like? What do they say? So that's
a really good point, Sam. I mean, so, you know, obviously I know the topic of Scanxiety. I know it's a big topic that ends up being a breakout group at a lot of our patient sessions. I know it's a topic of some of the virtual support groups that our social worker Molly, you know, goes through. But, you know, this may be the first time as a physician, I think I'm like sitting in the crux of it as you talk through it. And I guess a few things actually just dawned on me. So number one, as a physician, we also have Scanxiety. I think it's very easy for us to just say, get a scan, right? Follow up in X number to get a scan. And, you know, what I try to wrap my head around is, okay, you know, on one hand, scans can be very supportive and very comforting because we know we're keeping a close eye on things and we know it's all good. So for me as a physician, sometimes ordering the scans makes me feel better because I know that if something's going to happen, I'm going to pick it up soon. And I think for some patients, that's the same too. But I think sometimes maybe what I need to be more cognizant of is every time I order a scan, there's probably some built-in anxiety that's happening for a patient around that. And like I was saying too, I think I personally know I have Scanxiety. You know, there's definitely patients in certain scenarios where I get anxious about opening up their report, you know, because I'm, you know, concerned about what I'm going to see. And then once I know the result, there's some, you know, again, we're calling it anxiety, but it's a different emotion that I feel as a physician walking up to that closed door. Right. And, you know, sometimes if I know that it's going to be good news, and I actually have a few of these patients, they don't want the small talk, right? You know, and honestly, even before I show my face, I stick a thumbs up through the doorway. So I know when I open the door, there's just this like sense of relief that comes over them. But that's not something I do with every patient. That's after we've had conversations about that's how I'm going to deliver. That's how I'm going to deliver the news. And obviously, if the news wasn't totally thumbs up worthy, I'm not going to be putting another hand gesture out. You know, it's going to be me coming in and talking through it. But I guess I should probably ask my patients a little bit more about, do they want the small talk when I walk in, or they just want to cut to the chase? And you get to know your patients, and there's definitely some kind of cut to the chase patients and other ones that needs to be a little bit smoother. The other thing that I just want to put in here, because I know it's a huge deal for a lot of you out there, is you get your scans in one place and you see a physician in a different. And probably like the bane of my existence is a patient getting a scan in another state and me not having the results or me not having the images in time to have them reviewed to be able to have that conversation with the patient. And that just can make Scanxiety on both ends a zillion times worse if then we don't have the information to talk about that day. And I think you've run into issues with this before. Either it's because we don't get the report or because there's been an insurance delay. And so for patients out there listening to this, I would say the thing to minimize that, so it sounds like this is what Sam does. She gets scans here in Philly on Monday to be seen here in Philly on Wednesday. And I'm not saying all of you need to necessarily go to the exact location, but to try to build in that wiggle room. So if you're going to get scans in, Kentucky, but you're going to have a visit with us in Philly, make sure there's enough time for those Kentucky scans to kind of get to us, so we have a time to process it, so we'd be able to have, the best way to, best conversation we can have once we finally meet each other. And then for insurance reasons, because I think insurance issues can also contribute to Scanxiety, it's just working with whatever provider orders them to make sure that process is as smooth as it can possibly be. So there's just a few of the bits that I think from a physician standpoint that maybe I think about, but maybe not even in the context of Scanxiety that I just wanted to share.
I agree with if you are off location. I've done it both ways. Yeah. I've done it off location and I've done it. Yeah. The reason I do it. Yeah. And people ask me that all the time. Why do you drive to Philadelphia if you live in Virginia? And this is part of my controlling my controllables. Yeah. And so I think for everybody, it's different. So for some people, it doesn't work and they feel more at home at the house because now I've extended my time. Right. But you extend your time when you're at home anyway. Yeah. Because you go there and you go for your scans. And then I think for me, when I did it that way, I had to, oh gosh, now I've got to send them off and I've got to make sure that they're going to get to you. And I worry about the quality. And to be honest, for me, I almost have the same text every time I go. And when I don't, I'm like, oh, where's Andrew today? So, and they're very nice and they all know me.
But it's the controllables.
It's the controllables.
It's the familiarity.
It's just the familiarity and it makes it, and I know that it's going to be the correct contrast. I know that it's exactly the way that my physician would want it to be. I know that he has access to it as soon as it pops up because it's the same system. And I know that if the radiologist hasn't read it, he can still see the scans. Yeah. So for me, it just makes more sense, but it doesn't mean that works for everybody. And, and it's what, 4.5, 5 hour drive with the easy pass because circumvent that traffic a little bit, but it works. And then we plan something in around it. I mean, we've done trips in between. I've gone to visit my daughter that's in college, and sometimes we went to Amish country and different things like that. So this is what I mean by you have your scan and then you plan for a good event after your scan so that you can kind of relax or try to take your mind off of it and then go and see the physician, because Monday is the anxiety, Tuesday is my fun time, Wednesday is I got to face the door day.
It's the door day.
Yes. So and that's just how that goes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was I'm going to say I appreciate both of your perspectives here, and a couple of things come to mind. One is maybe Scanxiety needs to be changed to scan emotions or scan motions or something, just based on what you both said. And I think, Marlana, it's really helpful to hear your perspective as well, because, I think it brings up a good point that there's the patient really at the center of all of this. And then, as we sort of talked about at the very beginning, there's a system around that patient. And so even the doctors and nurses supporting ocular melanoma patients are rooting for patients and are so dedicated. And so you're feeling this too. A couple questions that we received previous to this conversation get at that. It's some of the other people in the system. And I'm wondering if you each could maybe speak from your perspectives about the caregivers and family members here. So a couple questions that I think maybe go together. So as a caregiver, what can I do to assist with this anxiety or set of emotions, so that my loved one doesn't feel overwhelmed, and I would add maybe alone. And from the patient side of that, how can I explain this to my family so that they can support me? And I wonder if from each of your perspectives, you could speak a little bit to that.
I think the preparation that's a big one. I think for me, what I use a lot is deep breathing. I don't meditate a whole lot, but deep breathing, I definitely, once I start feeling as if things are closing in, I notice that my breath changes. So I become more present. even if it's not just a breathing technique, I take my focus to the now instead of thinking about what's to come. Because I think once you think about what's to come, then the what ifs come up. So I will bring my thoughts to, I'm sitting in this room, I'm sitting on this chair, and I will notice the things around me, and then I will start to breathe, and I will focus on that, and I will focus on for me, going for scans is a good thing because I do want to know what's going on. It's one of the controllables. At least I can control how I go forward with my disease. If I don't go for scans, that's a way worse scenario for me, because then that means I don't have any control. So then I start focusing on the positives behind, I'm going for the scans, I'm going to find out what my next step might look like. I also visualize, this is where some of my visualization comes in. I visualize all the good parts of my life and how those won't change, even with whatever that comes behind the door. I still have all of those. So those are the types of things that I do. And then I definitely, so going up to scans, I will say that it's, if you have a lot of time, this is me personally, if I have a lot of time on my hands, then that's when the what ifs will creep in. When I don't have a lot of time on my hands, then I just don't have time to think about it. So I've been known to schedule 3 things at the same time on the same day and just hop around from one to the other, and everyone thinks I'm crazy. And I had to explain that to my husband at one point. He's like, why did you do a swim meet and a tennis tournament, and then you said you'd volunteer? Yeah. And I was like, well, because I can run there at 9 o'clock, then I get there at 10, and at 11 I'm doing this. And he totally thought I was crazy. But then once I explained that this is how I deal with it, he's like, okay, I get it. Randomly last night, I decided at 10 o'clock at night, I was going to get in the pool. What I did. So, and everyone was like, why are you getting in the pool at 10 o'clock at night? Aren't you supposed to be like preparing to go to scans? And I was like, no, not yet. I'm going to relax. And so that's what I did. And as long as they understand, and they do, my family really understands that I will do odd things like, hey, we're all going on a hike today. And then they'll be like, why are we going on a hike randomly? And, someone will say mom's scans or something's coming up. And so definitely, I think everyone understanding that you have different ways of dealing with things. And for me, the outdoors is a big thing. Music is another one. I did forget about music. So I do like to listen to, when I'm nervous, I'll listen to dance music, happy dance music. And it really just, 80s dance music, and just want to get it all out there. But then when I go for my scans, no, it has to be quiet music. And I'm like, no, you need to put something quiet, something soft, something meditative, something that I can focus on the music and the sound and not on everything else going around. So I use my music that way too. Trying to think of what else that I use. I speak to my friends. I definitely speak to my OM friends. That helps a lot. Knowing that everyone else is going through the same thing. I'm not alone. That helps a ton. Being able to go to the meetings and speak to other people, meet them there, and then being able to have those relationships, that helps a lot. So those are the things that I do. And then I will say, the person you take with to scans is really important. I feel like I think the person that you take with needs to not be a very anxious person. You need to make sure that you're cognizant of that. And if the person is very anxious, then maybe just say, hey, we can go to tea afterwards, or we can do something afterwards. But I do think I have a very chatty daughter that likes to talk to me the entire 4.5, 5-hour car ride. It's perfect. It is really perfect. We catch up on all sorts of things, and she's just very happy, and it takes my mind off of it. And I hear all sorts of things that I would never hear any other time. And my husband is he's a little put out by it, because he used to be the one that went with me all the time. Now it used to be our daytime, him and myself, but I think he is so nervous that it kind of rubbed off on me. And my daughter's not as nervous. And so it's the mom-daughter time has helped me tremendously, because we focus on the Mexican food we're going to have afterwards, and the shopping. So that helps. Whereas my husband is like, oh gosh. So that helps. Make sure you know who you're taking with to scans.
And before we go over, Dr. Orloff, to you to get your perspective on the caregiver piece, just one follow-up question for you, Sam. How do you maintain that open communication with caregivers and loved ones in your life to have those conversations about what is most supportive to you? You sort of hinted at that, and how different members of your family may play different supportive roles to you. And I wonder how if you could just speak a little bit to how you negotiate that, or how you're able to maintain that communication.
It has changed over time because the children were really young when I was first diagnosed. So when they were younger, we just spoke about OM in general. We never really spoke. They weren't really part of the whole scanning cycle. They knew where I was going, but other than that, we just made sure that they understood what I'm dealing with. And if they had a question, we would always answer that question. And I think for the kids, we normalized it a lot because I didn't want it to be this big scary thing that mom does every 3 months. I didn't want them to have the same anxiety that I have. So we have a lot of eyeball stuff everywhere. It kind of became the joke in the house. And not that Scanxiety was the joke, but they make fun of me being the one-eyed person. And that's okay, because that's how I presented it to them, because with kids, using humor to make it feel okay felt like an easier way for them to deal with it. And so that's how we did it going along. And then as they grew to be older, they really understand now what the disease is and that I go every 3 months. And the conversations have become different. And if they have questions, I just answer the questions. They know ahead of time. They kind of know mom's going, it's 3 months, mom's going, and we talk about it. We just very openly say, do you have any questions? And I have asked them, and we have one in counseling for, just to make sure that she's okay with some of the things that go on, and others don't feel like they need to. And yeah, I just think sometimes with my husband, I think I don't give him I realized where I would sometimes be very nervous and take it out on him. And then I would be like, oh gosh, I need to step back a moment. And him and I would discuss that a lot, about how I needed to tell him when I needed something, especially with him. I think you remember everyone else, but you forget your spouse sometimes, because they're supposed to know exactly how you feel. So we definitely make some time to sit down and say, this is how I'm feeling today, or that's how I'm feeling about this, or this is how you can support me. Because sometimes I think you want the hugs and the love and all of that. It's very difficult to be the caregiver of somebody who's going through this, because sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want to feel normal. And I do feel sorry for anyone who is a caregiver, because at times I want oh, love me, hug me, I have cancer, please come and, give me all the love that you can. And then other times I'm like, I'm normal. There's nothing wrong with me. Don't treat me like I need to be treated with kid gloves. I'm good. And he doesn't know which days those are. So I now have to tell him, today's a good day. You come and give me big hugs. And other days I'm like, listen, big, strong lady. Yeah, don't do any of that. So you just have to learn to talk to them about it.
Thanks, Sam. Really a lot of words of wisdom, I know, gained through your own personal struggle and trial and error and personal relationships. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. Dr. Orloff, I wonder if you have thoughts on sort of the caregiver and family perspective, as a clinician, what you see.
Yeah, I would say I have this little kind of cheat sheet in front of me of little bullet points for advice, to give the patient or family members. And I think in some ways, Sam's, I think, kind of hit all of them. But yeah, I think, I always feel like there's some patient caregiver partnerships where, the patient comes, I'm talking to the patient, but I know that it's the family member or the support caregiver that is really hearing me and taking all the notes. And so certainly if it's the day of a scan results, I think there's some patients who want to be present to hear the results, but especially if it's starting to be maybe news that we weren't hoping for or expecting, I can see this kind of, glazed over look, and I know that's probably where they're going to all the million what ifs that they've pushed, aside for so long. And then it's me talking to the caregiver. And then I know, and I normally try to circle back at the end of whatever visit and say, hey, listen, I know we talked a lot today about X, Y, or Z. You've taken, sometimes they've taken notes, you take some time, go through this. And then I arrange for like a follow-up visit. A short follow-up visit where they can kind of decompress with their family or their caregiver. But then I can circle back with the patient directly as the provider. And so that's, from a medical, provider standpoint, that's definitely a role I see of some of the caregivers in some of the scenarios where maybe unexpected news is being delivered. The other piece as a provider, I want to make sure patients are aware of is, while number one, yes, all of these feelings are completely normal, and you should give yourself permission to feel these feelings. I think, I'm sure if you polled the UM community, I think Scanxiety, or whatever we've decided to term it now, is a very, very common thing to go through. Some patients need a little bit more than that, whether that's medication just in and around the time of scans, or that's medication, kind of through the early years of diagnosis, or even longer than that. And that's where, if you're feeling like maybe your Scanxiety is out of proportion to maybe what could be considered kind of more standard. So, not just the days before and days after, we're talking weeks or months, or it's really been kind of paralyzing after your diagnosis, then you need to talk to your provider, whether it's your medical oncologist or your primary care doctor, to work with you to either set up, time to talk additionally, or connect you with a counselor, or even sometimes to start medication. Because this stuff's hard. This is hard. I mean, what I tell patients, especially when they're first diagnosed and then kind of going through all the motions of all the scans, is, I think none of us envision ourselves as getting cancer, let alone a rare cancer, let alone a rare cancer that has a very specific recommended surveillance pattern that requires frequent MRIs, which are no fun for anyone, and all the other stuff that goes along with that. So just be open with your provider about any emotions you're feeling. I have some patients where I've adjusted scan intervals because of such anxiety, or because of MRIs being additionally anxiety provoking. We've decided to alternate with other modes of imaging. So be open with your provider, just the way you're open with your family, and we work together to come up with the best possible plan.
I think too, it's important to remember that as Marlana was speaking, it looks different in every patient, and that's okay. I think instead of looking for the one specific, oh, I'm anxious, that's why we were saying maybe it needs to be a range of emotions. It's okay to understand that it's a range of things. And I think one of the things somebody was asking was, how can I explain this to my family? It's very difficult, because when you go for scans, some of the things you hear, people say, oh, I know you're going to be okay. And that's very difficult to hear, because it feels as if they don't really understand you, or they don't understand the process, because how do they know it's going to be okay? They don't really understand how that affects you. So I think being just explaining exactly how you're feeling in that moment, and explaining that, for me, the way I see it is, this is the time now, then I have scans, and after those scans, life can change completely. And if you explain it to people that way, that's the door principle of waiting for that door to open, because that door opening and whatever comes through that door will decide which pathway goes. If it's a good scan, then your life goes down one pathway. If it's not a great scan, your life goes down a different pathway. And it's that's explaining it to people that way, that's what you're waiting for, might make it more real for people to understand why you're so nervous about a scan.
That's really helpful. Sam, I think the last part about how to explain it really to anybody, I mean, family members, friends, I think that's really helpful. And I know I often heard this from Greg, and I've heard it from other ocular melanoma patients too, sometimes because you don't often have like typical chemotherapy with ocular melanoma, you don't have a lot of outside signs of the significance, how serious what you're dealing with is. And so sometimes you have to rely on kind of your own outreach and telling friends and family kind of what it is you're dealing with, more than maybe you would in other situations. I think the wisdom that you both provided in this kind of in response to this last set of questions is really helpful. And I would kind of summarize all of this in open communication. So open communication with friends and family as much as you feel comfortable. And Sam, I think you gave some great examples and tips about how to do that. Dr. Orloff, I think your perspective of being open with your providers, and if there's any question about whether or not how you're dealing with this is typical or outside any sort of bounds, to err on the side of really sharing with your clinicians what it is you're dealing with. And together with your clinicians, you can make that decision about what other resources do you want to bring in. So I would kind of summarize that last little segment of discussion as really open communication. And I think the point that both of you made that this is unfortunately a typical part of this disease. And so not to feel shame around it, not to feel like you're different. I mean, everyone deals with things differently and everyone has their own unique circumstances that will influence the situation, but not to feel bad for feeling these feelings, I think is a point that you both tried to drive home. I really appreciate you both being here for the discussion today. I think this should be an ongoing conversation and eventually, hopefully, a Facebook Live once we can get technology to cooperate so we can do this live. But in the meantime, as we sort of close this conversation today, I wonder if you have some closing thoughts for our viewers.
Well, for me, I'm very excited about the upcoming Cure OM Symposium together with TJU in August. I think being able to see people in person always helps because that's how you start relationships. And then TJU has fantastic social workers who are really always available to be able to help with the psychosocial component. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being able to discuss the different emotions surrounding OM at that meeting and making new making new relationships with people so that we can go forward and support one another.
Yeah, I second that. So it'll be great to see everybody in person where we can put a lot of this, into context. And I do believe there is a special session on the topic as part of the breakout sessions where the social workers will be moderating. So hope to see you all there.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Dr. Orloff, and thank you to all viewing this. And as they both mentioned, the Cure OM and TJU meeting will be August 26th. Please go to the Facebook page for the registration link. And don't forget to also check back in about the Ask the Expert webinar this Thursday, July 28th at 1 o'clock Eastern. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.